Welcome to Worldview Tube's Washington Report. It is February 16th, 2026. I'm joined by Jim Paff of theconservativecaucus.com. Jim, how are you doing this week?
Well, doing well. I'm watching Washington, D.C. be Washington, D.C., so there's that, and whatever that's worth to the American people. But I think I'm with the American people. I think we'd like to see things change, and I think they're going to generally stick in with all the chaos because they know that there's a better life ahead of them.
Well, let's start with the what's going on in D.C. with the House trying to pass a spending bill. I think most of it is for DHS, and the Democrats are stalling, trying to push back on reforms against ICE and DHS for body cameras and the different types of stuff. Let's watch House Majority Whip Tom Emmer discuss this on Fox and Friends.
Okay, let's get into some of their demands. This is what they say. Make ICE agents show ID and wear body cameras. That's already happened to body cameras. Ban agents from wearing masks. Ban racial profiling. I'm not sure that's happening. Require a warrant to enter private property. Of course, they're trying to take this from the civil process to the criminal process. Are any of these things non-starters or anything that y'all can find compromise on?
Well, first off, common sense. I mean, they want law enforcement agents to show ID when they don't want voters to show ID. There's no common sense here. This is all politics. They're talking around the issue. What they're doing, Lawrence, is they want reforms that, frankly, protect illegals and criminals at the expense of tax-paying citizens. Let's go after that warrant one. You already have administrative warrants, and Americans, if they were told the truth by these guys, would understand in order to get an administrative warrant, the defendant, the subject of the warrant, has already had full due process. Now they want what they say is a judicial warrant. And on its face, it sounds reasonable, right? Well, we got to get a judicial warrant. The administrative warrant is already the same thing. Putting a judicial warrant on top of that, you'll never get a judicial warrant in the timely manner that you need to get it. So the result, mass amnesty, which is essentially what we had under the Biden administration. They want this again. They make it sound like it's something good. It's not.
Yeah, Jim, what if some of these ICE agents and law enforcement officers are minorities? They don't know how to go get an ID, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what Democrats think. I saw a really good video that had an interview of a couple white ladies saying how difficult and challenging it is for black people to be able, and the guy who played the video, it was a black guy. He portrayed himself like he was a monkey trying to figure out what a computer was, very a la 2001: A Space Odyssey. In other words, he was mocking these white people for pretending like black people are monkeys. You remember how people got upset with Donald Trump because there was that tiny clip on the end of a voter problem video that had Barack Obama and Michelle Obama out as monkeys. And that was bad. I mean, I criticized what had happened, and Donald Trump apologized for it. But the real problem with that is with Democrats. They really think black people are stupid. White Democrats think black people are stupid. And that's really egregious. But to go to Tom Emmer's point, everything Tom Emmer said is 100% correct. Let me put a fine point on this. 8 U.S.C. 1226, this is in the federal code, and this is the law related to this. This is specifically what it says, just to bolster Emmer's point. Quote, on a warrant issued by the Attorney General, an alien may be arrested and detained pending a decision on whether the alien is to be removed from the United States. Okay, this is what he's talking about with the judicial warrant. There is no judicial warrant for illegals. The law itself right now says that the Attorney General can issue a warrant. That's a process that goes outside of our typical legal system. Why was that put into the law? Because it's impossible when you have these sorts of circumstances to run people through the normal legal system in the United States. Before Joe Biden opened the gates wide to let millions of people into this country with no obstruction. It would have been bad enough to have hundreds of thousands a year, say, or maybe even 100,000 a year, have to run through our normal court process, jamming it up. That's why Congress wrote the law that it exists in 8 U.S.C. 1226. They gave the Attorney General power to issue a warrant and to move the process through a court system that is outside of our court system. There's an administrative process. In other words, here's one other capping point here. There are no illegal aliens who get the full scope of American rights in the judicial process when they come here illegally. That was designed by Congress. That's the way it is. Democrats want to change that because, as Tom Emmer rightly said, they want illegals in this country. That's what's going on here. They want the illegals. They know it creates chaos. They know that it benefits them in congressional apportionment. And frankly, it probably benefits them more than we know right now when it comes to illegals voting, because we can't detect the precise number, since the majority of states right now, including some Republican states, are refusing to give Harmeet Dillon in the Justice Department their voter registration databases so that illegals can be taken out. And then we there are probably a lot of illegals registered to vote. We don't know that all of them vote, but I'll bet you the number that vote is a lot higher than we know. Mm-hmm. So this is the obstruction process that Democrats, and frankly, whatever Republican secretaries of state or whoever the election authority is in those states, who are refusing to give the voter rolls. This is the design. It's to destroy the American Republic. That is the goal of Democrats.
Yep. And in other news, I guess the administration took down, there is Stonewall National Monument in New York City. I guess it's a monument for an uprising in 1969 of LGBTQ individuals. And there's pride flags there. And we took down the pride flags at the Stonewall National Monument. And it's just the end of the world that we took down the pride flag. So here is Senator Schumer out there with the press.
So, folks, we're here, of course, at Stonewall, which is the birthplace of the LGBTQ plus movement. The sacred ground here represents courage, resiliency, the fight for equality, which always goes on in America. This sacred ground is so important, and in 1969, as everybody knows, brave New Yorkers stood up here as an act of resistance, targeting against discrimination. It sparked the beginning of a movement that changed America and the world forever. And we're not going back. We're not going back. The Trump administration's removal of the Pride Rainbow flag from the Stonewall National Monument is a deeply outrageous action that must be reversed. It's an effing disgrace. Right. It's just awful. When the Trump administration ripped the Pride flag down, it was a direct attack on this community, attempt to chip away at hard-won civil rights. So today we're fighting back and taking action. I am introducing legislation to designate the Pride flag as a congressionally authorized flag in America, and that means it can be flown here and everywhere else. And no one can take it down.
There you go. It was such a travesty that the flag got taken down.
By the way, Democrats love Stonewall. You know why? It was just as violent as the protests that they're supporting and, frankly, funding now. Back then it was just a natural uprising. I'm not aware of any funding that went into what happened at Stonewall. But Stonewall was a multi-day event filled with violence. This is what Democrats love. Mm-hmm. By the way, I've always said, and I've run marriage amendments successfully around the country or advised on them, and I believe that we should have one man, one woman marriage in this country. That's what the definition should be. But the reality is we should not have any special rights either against homosexuals or people of any sexual orientation, or special rights for them. And what Democrats have been working to do over the last 20 plus years is to create special rights for homosexuals and homosexual married couples, so-called. I mean, listen, everyone should have the right to choose how they're going to live. They do not have a right to make my rights go away on their behalf. Stonewall was an egregious event. It was violent itself. And it's absolutely against everything that we've ever done as a country. The only reason they put up anything there was to support this boutique political issue that Democrats use to try to put wedges between people. This is Democrat politics, frankly, as far back as Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This is how Democrats have been operating actually since before the Civil War. The Democrats were always the racist, slaving party. And when that went away, they were the Jim Crow party. And when that went away, they were the Marxist, wedge-building, ethnocentric politics, economic division politics that has laid out what they are even up to this day. And it's crazy. It's absurd for Democrats to be standing up for this violent event that took place in Stonewall.
Yeah, I mean, they have been basically rewarded every time they commit violence. And we now are seeing a uprising in the trans violence. These transgender, not just the LGBTQ, but the person that I think it was a man, right, who converted to a female in Canada. And that is
he didn't convert to a female, but he claimed to.
Claimed to. But that is disturbing. If you go watch some of the videos of him before, he is demonically possessed, I think. I mean, if you watch some of those videos of him before he did it, there are some creepy videos. And
it's hard to ever precisely tell demonic possession, but that does exist. I can tell you this, every Christian listening, and we've got a lot of Christians that listen to this network, every one of you needs to understand Ephesians 6 does apply. The principalities and powers of darkness. There is a spiritual battle that's taking place in this world that is real, that we need to fight in a spiritual manner. But it doesn't stop there. Why do you think Paul called them principalities and powers of darkness? Because they inject themselves into powers of the earth if they can. And you have minute instances like this one person, obviously a horrible crime, but this one person potentially being that way. But these sorts of efforts from demonic powers, they do happen in a big way. Every believer in Scripture needs to recognize that. But more importantly and specifically, Democrats cannot win with their ideas. The Marxist socialist construct that was developed mostly by Karl Marx, but even though it existed somewhat beforehand, he just kind of consolidated it into one writing. That Marxist construct is antithetical to objective truth and reality. Democrats embrace that ideology in its various forms, in its various iterations. And to impose that on an American republic built on the idea of private property, personal freedom, and restricted government, the only way they can promote that is through violence. This is what Democrats are. They are a violent, un-American party that is not interested in the American ideal. They have a different ideal in mind, and they are in active pursuit of overthrowing the American republic. Everything they do fits in that category.
Well, let's go on to Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, who went on The View last week and tried using the Bible to defend gender mutilation of children and transgender ideology. Let's watch this.
But we rarely talk about the why. People want to know what drives us, especially in a world with social media where everyone's looking for the next authentic thing. For me, that's my faith. Most of the decisions I make are based on that golden rule that says we love our neighbor as ourselves. Yeah. And that parable of the Good Samaritan that says everyone is our neighbor. Yeah. And so when I've taken actions like vetoing the nastiest piece of anti-LGBTQ legislation that ever came through my state, I described it in those terms. I said my faith teaches me that all children are children of God. Yeah. And I didn't want people picking on those kids. Yeah. But we rarely talk about the...
Really?
He doesn't know his Bible any more than James Tallarico down in Texas running for U.S. Senate does. These are two guys who are attempting to bring in a fake Christian construct of reality into their politics. Whereas, and no one or hardly anyone puts them down for that. Even on the conservative side, I don't hear a lot of people calling them out for their clear heresies and inaccuracies in Scripture. But if you, as a Christian who is attempting to hold true to the values that are clearly laid out in Scripture, that are clearly understandable in Scripture, you're told to not get involved in the political realm. And that is something that people of faith, even if you're not of faith, but you know that biblical values are good, if you would accept the Ten Commandments as something useful, you need to be promoting that and pushing back against this. Listen, the whole transgender thing is so against the anthropology of man. In other words, what is man like? And our anthropology was put into place by God himself. From when he created them male and female, and he told a man to leave his mother and cleave to his wife. These are fundamental things that God himself designed into mankind. The creator of the universe, who's transcendent from the universe, all-powerful, all-knowing, all wisdom comes from him. Mankind doesn't create his own wisdom. He can only learn it from God. What he designed is what works. And we need to assert that again in society. And we have to undertake this politically because of this assault against mankind that Democrats are constantly foisting upon us. To mutilate children is an absurd way of going about things. I wonder if they would want to be mutilated in some other form. Of course they wouldn't, but they'll take kids and experiment on them for a political purpose. And it's insane. Democrats believe in it. And again, they're working hard to undermine and take down the American Republic.
Yep. Well, we got to go to break. We'll be right back in just a moment with more. Studies have shown America's water supply is not safe. It is filled with toxins and chemicals. Go look it up. This is fact. Fact check me. And then I'll offer you this solution. Worldviewwater.net. Take a look at this list. This water purifier removes all kinds of harmful toxins like lead, fluoride, chlorine, arsenic, pesticides, bacteria, and pharmaceuticals, and more. This is the water I give to my 3 dogs. I drink it every day. I have one of the filters in my kitchen, under the kitchen sink, and then I have one on my shower. Do you know how much your skin absorbs of water when you're in the shower each and every day? Protect yourself and your body. Remain healthy. Eat good food. Drink purified, clean water. One of the most powerful water filters available in America. Worldviewwater.net. That's worldviewwater.net. Again, tell your family and friends about it. In fact, maybe even give this as a gift to some of your family and friends, particularly those of you who have children and grandchildren. Worldviewwater.net. All right, welcome back from the break. I'm joined back by Jim Paff of theconservativecaucus.com. Jim, let's go on to Iran. Marco Rubio did a press conference this morning. I believe he's with the Turkish president next to him here. And he's talking about the deals, the negotiations going on, which are still ongoing. I believe there was another meeting this morning. But here's what Marco Rubio had to say.
The president always prefers peaceful outcomes and negotiated outcomes to things. He's a president that's shown his willingness to talk to anyone and meet with anyone. And I think if there's an opportunity here to diplomatically reach an agreement that addresses the things we're concerned about, we will be very open and welcoming to that. But I don't want to overstate it either. It's going to be hard. I mean, we're dealing, it's been very difficult for anyone to do real deals with Iran because we're dealing with radical Shia clerics who are making theological decisions, not geopolitical ones. But let's see what happens. I hope it works out. We all hope it works out. President?
Yeah, he's right. And that's the hard part. I mean, you can't trust them. They'll lie straight to your face. So even if a deal is made, we don't know if they're going to hold to that deal. I mean, we've seen it in the past, right?
Yeah, and this is why every person that is looking at this and seeing what's going on in Iran needs to understand that the radical part of the Muslim community. In fact, actually, listen, you read the Quran, it truly does call for violence in ways that are antithetical fundamentally from Western values that are created from the Judeo-Christian ethic.
Yeah, there's not radical Islam. It's just Islam. And then there's Muslims who don't really practice Islam. Right. Yes,
there are Muslims who actually believe in the ideas and concepts of liberty and believe in those Western values, and that's always existed in the Muslim community through the centuries since around 600 A.D. or whatever when it came into being. You know, you had Muslim philosophers who were trying to bring in the concepts of Aristotle and Plato into their way of thinking. You know, and yet they got pushed aside eventually because the core concepts of the Quran are violent against those who do not bring themselves into the Muslim community. And if they do and they're not originally Muslim, they're treated like second-class citizens. So this is a fundamental thing that some people in the Muslim world are willing to assert at the edge of the sword. And that's what's been going on in Iran since 1979, actually, in the setup to 1979. We had a weak policy leading up to that that eventually fell apart. And of course, you know, there are other issues, too. The Shah at the time had his problems as well. But this violence in the Muslim community is what is irrational. And they make no pretense of reason. To be candid, the concepts of actual reason, the laws of non-contradiction, the laws of causality, these are things that they ignore and they push aside. And to be candid, it's why Democrats tend to align so well with the radical Muslim community, because the same degree of irrationality is undertaken by them in their political arguments and their desire to impose something upon the people politically that they ought not to impose at all. So this is why you see Democrats, maybe less violent, but still violent nonetheless, never agreeing to anything that is real. And this is going to be the challenge for Donald Trump when it comes to the Muslim clerics in Iran.
Yep. Well, let's go on to AOC. I guess AOC is asked a question here. I don't know where she is. I saw Tim Burchett talked about how all these people, these congressmen and congresswomen are going over to Munich for some conference they're participating in while the government's about to be shut down, partially shut down. But here is AOC. She is in Munich, actually, asked about the U.S. defending Taiwan. And she has a great response. Let's listen.
Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
You know, I think that this is such a, I think that this is of course a very longstanding policy of the United States.
That sounded more like Joe Biden than AOC or Mitch McConnell.
I'm not even sure it rises up to that level. My wife came to me this morning. She said, "Did you see this? You got to do something on this, Jim. You got to put something out there." Listen, she's not ready for prime time. She's frankly not that smart anyway. She claims to have studied economics in college. I don't even know how she got through an economics book. Economics 101 is not the hardest thing in the world, but it does require a change in the way of thinking to understand it that, a lot of people haven't been exposed to. I doubt she got pushed through somehow because she ain't smart enough to have a college degree, it looks like to me. Listen, the other part of this is that her strategy, she hasn't figured out, like Bernie Sanders has, how to say to people what you hope they think you mean so they don't know exactly what you mean so that they can implement something that you didn't mean to support them for, right? This twisted logic, this irrational, relativistic way of of explaining what to do. She hasn't figured that out yet. She should have by this time. She's had such a high profile. The American people are not going to accept it. Democrats may, but the American people aren't. Frankly, guys like Gavin Newsom, who are much more eloquent in their inane speech and lies, is probably more likely to get the Democrat nomination than someone who can't even say what Taiwan is all about because she has no freaking clue.
Yeah, and it also looks like Stephen A. Smith is still not ruling out a run for president for the Democrat Party. So we'll watch that as well. I saw he was doing an interview this weekend, and he said he was not ruling it out. He's never been in politics, so I don't know what the.
In his case, I think he's smart enough to know that he ain't going nowhere. But he's also smart enough to recognize that if he keeps it hanging out there, it'll bring more people to listen to him to see what's going on. That's what I think's really happening.
It's a good publicity stunt for him.
It is.
All right. Well, let's go back. One last clip of Marco Rubio at this press conference was asked about the Ukraine-Russia war, and here's what he had to say.
The only comment is the United States' interest is to see the war end, and we want to do what we can to make it end. We're the only nation on earth that apparently can get both sides to the table to talk. I'm not here to insult anybody, but the United Nations hasn't been able to do it. There's no other country in Europe that's been able to do it. The United States has been successful at being able to get both sides to talk. I mean, for the first time, I don't know, in a number of years, you actually have at a technical level military officials from both sides sat down last week in the Middle East, and we'll restart those talks again in Geneva later this week. Only comment.
All right. So he says the U.S. is the only one that can bring both sides to the table to talk, but it's still happening. It's still, it's still going on. You don't hear much news about the Ukraine-Russia war. I think it's kind of died down from the past couple since it's been going on so long. But do you see it ending anytime soon, Jim?
I don't know. It always feels like it's starting to get close, and Vladimir Putin's Lucy with the football. For those of us old enough to know the Peanuts reference, the reality is that we got into this thing because a guy who's an evil leader, Vladimir Putin, was not challenged by an incredibly weak, uninformed, and lazy administration, Joe Biden, when at the end of a stupid set of policies implemented by the United States from the Bush administration through the Obama administration and forward, with only one person that could deal with this in clarity, Donald Trump, not being there at the time that the invasion happened. It's a difficult mess to get out of, and I just don't know it at this point. By the way, I will make one point, though. You asked, I think he's standing, you said you thought Marco Rubio was standing with the president of Turkey. No, he wasn't standing. He was standing by Viktor Orban, the Hungarian president, who everyone claims is a dictator, and not Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, who is an authoritarian dictator.
Yeah.
But this is the way Democrats and people on the left think. The actual dictators give us freedom, and the people seeking to implement freedom in society are the dictators. That's how Democrats and the leftists worldwide work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But back to Ukraine, we were also stupid in teasing Ukraine having NATO membership as well, right? I mean, that should have never happened.
It should never happen. There was no need for it. And when it comes to Ukraine and NATO, there's a very long discussion that could be had to clarify everything that goes around that. But let me just summarize a couple things that show, in part, how we've gotten to this point. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell down. Boris Yeltsin becomes president. He had his problems. He was not perfect, but he and his successor were attempting to try to inject Russia into the world of nations. The West, which was so used to not accepting Russia because they were the evil place in the world, didn't bring them into the community of nations. They still looked at them as a Warsaw Pact, almost communist country, and they wouldn't easily bring them in. This allowed a power vacuum to develop in Russia. And again, I'm skimming over to the top here. There's a lot more to it. Yeah. But a power vacuum eventually existed in Russia that ultimately allowed Vladimir Putin, a former KGB agent, to come in and do something similar to what China is doing. Have these communist principles in your governing structure while providing some degree of economic freedom, at least enough to keep people satisfied and to keep your country running. But the U.S. policy and even the policy of the West messed this up. There was no reason to bring Ukraine into NATO after the Berlin Wall fell because you did not have a country that was going to be invading Europe at that time. It was a time for peace and building economic relationships as well as other fundamental relationships to allow Russia to come and become what everyone said they wanted it to become when the Soviet Union fell, that no one would allow it to become.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we're on a break. We're all out of time. We're not at a break. We're all out of time. We'll be back tomorrow with another report. Until then, take care.